Hey there folks, my name is Warren Maruziak. I'm a technical evangelist here at Atlassian, and today I'm going to give you a quick demo of how Rovo Dev code review works in Bitbucket and in GitHub. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is go over kind of what the next 20 minutes is going to look like. We're going to take a quick look at how to get started with Rovo Dev code review. So this will be how to install it and how to set it up to review changes in Bitbucket and GitHub. Once we're done that, I'm going to take a look at how to add custom coding standards to your repositories by adding a review agent.md file to your repos. Then we'll take a look at how do you add acceptance criteria to your Jira issues so that you can know when a Jira issue is done or not. Then I'm going to take a quick look at a calculator app that was written in C++ and it gets deployed as AWS Lambda using Bitbucket pipelines. We'll make a minor change to this. We'll commit and push, and then we're going to cut a PR after the pipeline runs. And we'll see Rovo Dev add a bunch of annotations to the PR based on our custom coding standards and our acceptance criteria. And we're going to see that in both GitHub and Bitbucket. And then finally, I'll do a quick review of the key takeaways. All right, let's go learn how to install this. So from Google, we're going to search for Atlassian Rovo Dev. We're going to come up to this. If you click on it, you'll see a try it for free. If you click try it for free, and you're logged in with your Atlassian account, you'll see all the sites you have admin access to, and you'll be able to install Rovo Dev in any one of them. So your admins will need to do this. You need access to grant permissions and all that stuff. But once this is done, Rovo Dev will be available on your site. Once you've got Rovo Dev installed, you can go over to your site, and if you take a look at the app switcher at the top, you can click this, and if you expand it, you should see Rovo Dev. If you click on Rovo Dev, you'll come to this screen, and one of the things you'll notice in the middle here is Code Reviewer. And you can enable Code Reviewer on your repositories. So if you click this, you're going to see GitHub and Bitbucket. You'll have to have integrated GitHub and Bitbucket into your Jira site already, but once that's done, these will be visible. So you can click on Bitbucket, and you'll see this dialog, and you can activate it for all eligible repositories and follow the prompts. And if we go back and we choose GitHub, you'll be asked to select an organization. Once you've chosen your organization, you'll be able to enable Rovo Dev code review for the organization, and then you can click on organization settings, and it'll list all of the repositories in your organization. And for each individual repository, you can enable it for that particular repository, and you can drill in further for additional settings. And this is where you can ask it to do AI code reviews for the repository. You can have it do acceptance criteria checks for the repository, and you can decide how often it runs. So you can set it to only run when the pull request is created, or you can have it set to run every time a new commit is added to the pull request. So if you want to save a little bit of money, you can have it only run when the pull request is created, or if you want to have it constantly evaluating the changes that are made to the pull request, you can select the second option. So once that's done, you'll be able to go back to your code, make some changes, git commit, git push, and cut a PR in either Bitbucket or GitHub, and Rovo Dev will evaluate it. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump over and we're going to take a look at the review agent.md file in our Bitbucket repository, and I'll explain how that works. Before I jump over, it should be noted that you need to be an admin to be able to get into these settings and manage this. So your site admin will have to set this up for you. But once it's set up, it'll work for all of your developers. Now let's jump over to Bitbucket. So we're going to close this, and we're in Bitbucket. We're in a simple calculator app. I'm going to refresh this just so it's current. Now, if you have access to repository settings, you can also see your Rovo Dev code review settings here by clicking on repository settings, popping open features, and then choosing Rovo Dev code review. And we see a similar dialog to what we saw in the Rovo Dev settings screen we were just looking at. You can enable Rovo Dev code review on a per repository basis or turn it off. You can enable acceptance check criteria on a per repository basis or turn it off. And you can set it up so that Rovo Dev only runs when the pull request is created, or on each commit, and you can actually turn it so that it only runs when you manually run it. You can have it to not review automatically. So now that we've covered those settings, let's take a look at our review agent.md file. To add a review agent.md file to your repository, first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a .rovo dev folder, and inside this folder you're going to add a .review-agent.md file, and in this file you're going to add all of the prompts you want to send to Rovo Dev when it does a pull request code review for you. So when the pull request starts, Rovo Dev is going to come in, read this file, and it's going to take into account all of the prompts that are in here when reviewing your code. So if you're telling it to look for specific things in your code because it has standards that it has to meet, Rovo Dev will respect that and it'll add annotations to your pull requests that match these standards. So let's drill in now and take a look at what this file looks like. So the reviewagent.md file is really easy to write. You basically put some categories in it, like regulated data or tenant isolation, and then you add a collection of instructions. So for example, in regulated data, we're saying that we want to flag any new code that stores or logs personally identifiable information or protected health information. For tenant isolation, we're saying we want to flag any database queries, cache access, or API calls that does not filter or scope by tenant ID. For feature flags, we want to check that there is a clearly defined off path that restores previous behavior. So for each one of these, there's specific instructions. You can add as many of these as you want. You can have as many categories as you want. So we've got stuff for logging and metrics, domain-specific business rules, legacy system migration. So in this case, flag new dependencies on legacy modules with the add legacy tag, if possible. Design system and accessibility. So you can add that, cloud infrastructure policies, open source dependencies and licensing. So Atlassian kind of recommends these as a nice starting point. This file will be available in the resources tab for this webinar. We'll send it out. You don't have to use these. You can definitely generate your own, but these are reasonable ways to get started. So yeah, take a look, give them a try, and just add this to your repository. And once you've got Rovo Dev Code Review enabled, it'll parse this and add recommendations to your PRs, depending on what it finds, if it violates any of these rules. So now let's jump over to GitHub really quickly. We can see we have the exact same structure in here. We've got our Rovo Dev folder, and we've reviewagent.md file, and it's got the exact same data in it. So this works for both Bitbucket and GitHub. Now that we've seen how to set up that reviewagent.md file, let's jump over to Jira and take a look at how you set up acceptance criteria. So if we click over into Jira, I've got a couple Jira issues created here to add a log function to our calculator. So if we drill into the Bitbucket one, we can see in the description that I've got some acceptance criteria set up, AC. We want to add a log function to the calculator. We want to have some passing tests. We want to have some failing tests. We want to have some flaky tests. You can also define this for the GitHub example, exact same acceptance criteria. If you want to find the documentation about this, you can go to Google and you can search for Rovo Dev Code Review acceptance criteria. And we find this link here, and you can scroll through it, take a look. It tells you how to set it up and how to use it. But basically, it's going to search the description or custom fields for some specific labels. So acceptance criteria, AC, ACs, business requirements, functional requirements, definition of done, or DOD. So if you put a list of requirements underneath one of these headings, when Rovo Dev Code Review looks at a PR, it's going to take a look at the Jira issues that are linked in your commit messages, and it'll grab the first one that it finds, and it'll go to that Jira issue and it'll look for acceptance criteria. So in this case, if it found BPL 10 in the commit message of the commit that has the code that's being reviewed, it'll check that, it'll find these acceptance criteria, and it'll see whether or not the code implements all of these things. If it doesn't, it'll flag that so that you can see it. All right, so with that, let's jump over to our terminal now and make a small change, and then we'll see this in action. All right, we're gonna make the same change in two repositories, one change in the Bitbucket repository and the same change in the GitHub repository. So I've got a prompt set up for this because I want to add this log function, but I don't particularly want to type all of this code myself. So we're just gonna grab our prompt, we're gonna jump over to our terminal, and we're in the Bitbucket example here. The Jira issue is BPL 9, so I'm going to check out a branch. So now we're on the right branch. I'm going to ask Rovo Dev CLI, which is another product, to add this log function. So this is going to go and it's going to make some changes. It's going to add a log function that returns the log of the value with whatever base you give it. It's going to add some tests to the passing tests, but it's not going to add failing tests and it's not going to add flaky tests. So what we should see when the acceptance criteria check is done is that 2 of the acceptance criteria are met and 2 of them fail. Now, while this is running, I'm also going to move some problematic code that I've got staged into our source folder. So the problematic code is in this problematic code folder. And this is code that violates a lot of the stuff in the reviewagent.md file. So it's just staged as an example, but let's copy that over. Now we're going to take a quick modification of our cmake.list file just to make sure that that problematic code does get built. And it looks like Rovo Dev over on the top right here has finished making these changes. So let's do a git status and see what all the files are modified. So we've got 2 untracked files, our 2 problematic code files, which is expected. We've got a modification to our CMake list we just made, and then we've got changes to our calculator, H and CPP file, and our passing tests have been modified. So if we take a look at a git diff of source and then calculator.cpp, we can see that we've got a log file. Cool. So we're going to do a git add. We'll do a git commit, and we'll add our Jira issue ID in here. And then we're going to do a git push. Now that that's done, we'll jump back over to Bitbucket, and we should see a pipeline kicking off. There we go. So this pipeline is going to build our calculator. It's going to run 3 sets of tests in parallel. Then it's going to check to see if a Lambda function exists. If it doesn't exist, it'll create a new one. If it does exist, it'll just do an update. So while this is running, let's go make an exact same change to the GitHub version of this repo and get GitHub Actions kicking off as well. All right, so first thing we want to do is take a look at what branch we're in. And we're in mainline, so let's check out our new branch. We're in PPL 10. Because that's our Jira issue for tracking the changes to GitHub. I've got the same prompt in here, but let's grab that again. And let's get Rovo Dev making that change. Now, while Rovo Dev does that, I'm going to move the problematic code again. And I'm going to modify the CMake list file. Now we're just waiting for Rovo Dev to finish this up. Looks like it's done. So if we do a git status, we can see some changes. If we do a git diff on source calculator, yep, same file. Awesome. Again, important to throw your Jira issue IDs in the commit messages. All right, that fired that up to GitHub. So if we jump over to GitHub now, and we click on Actions, we can see that GitHub Actions is kicked off. Again, same steps, the Bitbucket pipeline.yaml file that runs in Bitbucket and the GitHub Actions file that runs in this repository basically do the exact same things. One was built from the other. I built the Bitbucket pipeline.yaml first, and then I used Rovo Dev code or Rovo Dev CLI to convert the Bitbucket pipeline.yaml file to a GitHub Actions file. So we build, and then we run a test matrix, which has got all 3 of our tests. So it's going to run passing tests, failing tests, and flaky tests. Then it's going to check if a Lambda function exists, and depending on the result of that check, it's either going to update or create. So we're just going to wait for this to finish, and then we're going to cut a PR on both. Let's go see if Bitbucket is done. All right, looks like Bitbucket is finished. So now we're going to cut a PR. All right, to cut a PR, we're going to go over to left nav here, and we're going to click on pull request. Then we're going to click create pull request. We're going to choose our source branch, which is PPL 9. We're going to merge into mainline. we're going to go /AI to create a pull request description. This is going to take a look at the code changes and automatically kind of summarize them for us. We can insert that. Just saves me time of having to type it all. Then I'm going to click create pull request. And pull request is kicked off. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can see that Rovo Dev has kicked off and it's reviewing this pull request. So we're gonna have to wait a little while for this to finish up. So while this is done, I'm gonna jump back over to GitHub and I'm gonna kick off a pull request there as well. All right, we're gonna click new pull request and choose our source branch, BPL10 in this case. We're gonna click create pull request, gonna create pull request. I'm going to assign this to myself, and Bitbucket's going to do some stuff. We don't get a notification that Rovo Dev code review is running in GitHub, but it is definitely running in the background. So let's jump over to Bitbucket, and we're just going to wait a bit. All right, in our Bitbucket PR, we've got a notification that the pull request is updated. So let's click reload page. And if we scroll down, we can see our acceptance criteria has been checked. So this issue is ready for review. The below acceptance criteria have been met, and we've met the log function exists in the calculator and has passing tests, but it correctly detected that there are no failing tests and that there are no flaky tests. And from here, you can automatically create a Jira issue if you want. Now we've got one already, so we're not going to do that in this case, but you could create another one. And Rovo Dev code review is still running. It's taking a look at the reviewagent.md file at this point, and it's checking all of our code changes against that, and then it's going to annotate and add a whole bunch of messages to this. All right, Rovo Dev tells us the page is ready to reload again, so let's click reload page. And now we can see that this pull request has been annotated by Rovo Dev with a whole bunch of warnings based on the things that it found in our reviewagent.md. So this was a logging problem. For each one of these, you can pop it open to see some details. It'll explain to you why it thinks you're violating it. So this is basically a line directly out of our reviewagent.md file. For each one of these, you can resolve it, you can delete it, you can like it, you can create a task, which will show up in your task list, so the person that owns this PR will know to do something. Or if it's a larger piece of work, you can create a Jira issue for it, and that'll show up under Jira work items. And if we just scroll down, we're going to see that it's added a ton of annotations, because that problematic code file that we created and added to the source directory basically had a ton of violations in it. So Rovo Dev did a really thorough job. It looked through that entire reviewagent.md file and it found a pile of problems with it. And again, we still got our acceptance criteria annotations at the bottom. So at this point, we could approve this PR and merge it, or we could go and fix all of these problems that we found. All right. Now let's jump over to GitHub and see if it's done reviewing GitHub as well. So jumping over to GitHub, we can see that we get a note at the top now that Rovo Dev has finished, saying that Rovo Dev has reviewed this pull request. And if we scroll down, we can see our acceptance criteria. Again, it found that we've met 2 of them. The log function exists and the log function has passing tests. But we can also see that it has not implemented failing tests and there are no flaky tests. So if we start scrolling down, we can see Atlassian bot has added the same kind of annotations to the GitHub PR as well. You can pop them open, you can see details, it'll explain what's been violated. You can resolve them, you can add comments to each one of them. From GitHub, there's no way to directly create Jira issues with this integration, but you can ask it to commit suggestions if they're very trivial. So yeah, just annotates it with all the stuff that it found in the reviewagent.md, just like it does in Bitbucket. So in this way, you can enforce your coding standards in all of your PRs. And this saves the developers that have to review these from having to check all of this stuff manually. It does a pretty good job of checking all of this automatically. So your developers can focus more on high-level architecture things and making sure that you're really solving the problem. The architecture is good. There's no design problems with it. And all of the minutiae of little details can be not completely left up to AI, but you can definitely save yourself a lot of time by using this. All right, let's jump back over to our slide deck real quick. So we've gone through code review, custom coding agents, acceptance criteria. We took a look at the app very briefly. We made some changes, pushed them up to GitHub and Bitbucket, and saw that they worked, and then we saw some PRs. So let's jump over to the key takeaway section now. All right, so let's take a look at our key takeaways here. First key takeaway is that you can standardize your code reviews by adding that reviewagent.md file and having Rovo Dev code review use it to analyze the code changes you've made. So in this way, you can easily enforce all kinds of coding standards in your PRs, and it frees your developers up from having to worry about all of that minutia. So if your devs are going through 2, 3, 4 PRs a day potentially, and they have to worry about all of the stuff in that 100-line reviewagent.md file, they're going to miss things. It's too difficult to keep that on your mind all the time, especially for many, many code reviews. So having a tool that automatically analyzes your code, applies those standards, and lets you know when they're violated is really useful. And it frees your developers up to do more value-added work instead of worrying about the minutia about whether or not every one of those points is checked. They can look at high-level architecture, make sure that the data is flowing in the correct spots, make sure you're really solving the customer impacting problem, and you can leave some of the minutia of dealing with standards up to tools that can enforce them for you. We also took a look at acceptance criteria. So you can add acceptance criteria to your Jira issues, and then when your PRs are cut, Rovo Dev will analyze those acceptance criteria. They'll take a look at your code, and they'll see if the code in the PR implements those acceptance check criteria correctly. If it does, it'll let you know that you've met them. If it doesn't, it'll warn you which ones have been missed. So it just helps teams understand whether or not all of the work has been completed. Some Jira issues get really complicated. They can have multiple things that need to be done. So this lets the developers kind of stay on top of whether or not they're getting everything or whether there's something they've missed. And when you're doing a lot of development work very quickly, sometimes you can miss things. So it just gives you another second set of eyes. And this is stuff that's potentially quite difficult for a human code reviewer to do because you're not familiar with the Jira issues that other people maybe are working on. So you'd have to go into their Jira issues, read them, understand them, and then check your code in the PR based on your understanding of that Jira issue. And this can be really difficult, again, if you're dealing with 2, 3, 4 PRs a day from multiple developers. So having this automated just saves developers a pile of time and mental effort. The final takeaway from this is a little bit of reporting from our internal development teams. So Atlassian dog food is its own product. When we implemented Rovo Dev code review across our development teams, the teams were tracking PR cycle times to see whether or not they got improvements in that stat. And across the board, it seems like we saw a 45% reduction in PR cycles since teams started using Rovo Dev code review. So this freed up developers from spending a ton of time on PRs and basically let them spend more of their time implementing software, solving problems for their customers, and building new features. So overall, like an increase by almost 50% productivity.